Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another incredible episode with Death in Cambodia, Life in America. It is Dorothy, your host, and today we have, I think, a very, very special guest and very relevant guest who can speak to a little bit about what's been happening. We know that there has been a lot of tensions between Thailand and Cambodia, and James Taing here is with us today. He is the founder of the Preah Vihear Foundation, which is a nonprofit that advocates for preserving the history of refugee rescue in Cambodia. He is also the co-director of the award-winning film documentary Ghost Mountain, which was released a few years back in 2019, which tracks his father's experience kind of revisiting the Preah Vihear Mountain. He also is the co-author of the book Under the Naga Tail, which is a project he started back in college and essentially is a book of his father's story. And I think it's kind of one of the only books out there that really, really gets down to the detail of what happened during Preah Vihear. Preah Vihear is actually something that I learned probably a few years back. So I feel like it's been quite recent. When I was kind of asking my dad about certain things and about my dad's experience, and all of a sudden he was like, yeah, then there was this one thing that was horrible that nobody knows about. So on this Preah Vihear temple kind of on the border, and I did research on it, and I truly believe it is one of the lost pieces of the entire Cambodian refugee experience of the whole war. I mean, and it's so dark and it's so brutal, and so then the news on it is so kind of non-existent. So here I have James today to bring him, and I wanted to talk to him about just like that whole experience. Hi, James. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dorothy. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for being here with us today. So as I've kind of mentioned, and I kind of want to just dive into it just because of the relevancy to what is happening today. Right now it is August, and there has been a lot of tensions between Cambodia and Thailand, and a lot of people don't know that this whole thing actually stems from way back beyond 2025. So back in 1904, there were a lot of ambiguities from essentially the Thailand and Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam borders for when that initially was set. And in 1962, the ICJ officially said that the Preah Vihear belonged to Cambodia. You know, there's people who have different opinions on it and whether or not that really is Cambodia and really that's not. And, you know, James, you having a father who had survived something as horrible and horrific as what had happened right after the war, I guess I just want to dive into it and be like, how does this whole thing affect you? And how have you just been feeling in general with all that's been happening?
The past few weeks have been, as somebody who's actually very used to lots of drama and intensity, the past few weeks have been quite a bit overwhelming. The level we had a few weeks back, a news company, Monday News, they took the film and started to show it, and it got 1 million impressions or viewers. And then suddenly Cambodians found our film, and it was a story that I had neglected from reaching out to, showing in Cambodia. I had recently put out a Khmer subtitle version a year ago plus. Didn't really promote it because I'm here in the United States, and I've been really focused on raising awareness and attention here in the US, who I knew would be very compelling from a human rights issue. But this news video just really put it on like the mind of all these Cambodians, and they just have been flocking to it, putting their comments and just saying, I've never heard this story. This is truly Cambodian history. A lot of people saying, I'm the younger generation. I never knew this. Why doesn't our government teach us this? And there's dovetails into today's conflict, where a lot of this is precipitated because of the conflict that's happening and this fear of this war that was about to wage on between these two countries. And this, as you had mentioned early on, this decades, almost century-long dispute of boundaries between the two countries. And where my father and all of these refugees were displaced or deported so brutally in the story Ghost Mountain is in one of the areas where it is in contention and dispute today. And that's the story I knew back many years back. I've been on this story for like 15 years, and I had discovered that everyone was calling it Preah Vihear. And when I went to go look for it, I went to Preah Vihear Temple and discovered that this is the site. Like right in the same mountainside is the site of where this terrible atrocity happened. And I knew that this was just going to be of such utmost importance for, Cambodian history, I think global history, UN history, that some huge atrocity happened 40 years ago, and nobody's talking about it right here next to one of the most important relics in Cambodian history. This is a story that had to be told at some point. And so now people are recognizing that fact today. And I'm just really kind of excited about it and people learning and educating themselves about it now.
Yeah, yeah. And just to kind of preface, because I can't assume that everybody on this podcast or listening to this knows about what happened. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, guys, just to give us a general sense, James, what exactly happened at Preah Vihear after the Khmer Rouge took over?
So in 1979, it was basically the fall of the Khmer Rouge. The Vietnamese had come in and liberated the country. I think it's a correct term in one ways because they were quite humanitarian. And they took over the whole country and disposed of the Khmer Rouge. And they got up to the border of the Thai-Cambodian border. And one of this area called Preah Vihear was one of the headquarters and strongholds of the Khmer Rouge because it's a sacred relic there. And they were really trying to protect. They were very strong in the Khmer identity and Korean identity. So this was important to them. There were many landmines that were there because of all the defense posts that the Khmer Rouge put up. The Vietnamese put up even more. What ends up happening is that many Cambodians who have gone through Pol Pot, the killing fields, this terrible genocide, feels like they're in just this constant flux of regime change and just leads from worse to worse to worse. You have the French who took over, and then you had Sihanouk, then you had the Japanese, then back to Sihanouk, I believe. And then you had Lanol, now the Khmer Rouge, and it just seems like war was becoming more and more constant in the country. And now it's even worse because you have one communist regime with the Khmer Rouge of its own that was so brutal against its own people. And now you have a sworn opposition, the Vietnamese. So many Cambodians said, we can't trust this new regime, and just started to flee and they felt there was a chance that they could leave and find refuge in another country. And the goal was to end up somewhere in the West. So hundreds and thousands of starving refugees, your father is one of them, my father, lots of them, end up going into Thailand on the border. And this was a very difficult predicament for Thailand, by all means. We shouldn't downplay the situation they're dealing with as well, is that there's a flood of potentially millions of refugees. And there's a fear that it would destabilize their country because of the needs of the population, the influx, and just trying to matriculate them in. There's also this concern at the time that there were communist surrogates within the ranks of refugees and that they were being allowed to pass through. And then they would spread communist propaganda throughout Thailand. That was a real fear because, as you know, the rest of Southeast Asia and Asia had turned communist. And Thailand was the one nation that had avoided colonialism, right? And it wanted in everything in its power to avoid this, again, another view of the West taking over through communism. So there was real. We have small instances of this in the United States with I think every country does now with their borders, right? And stuff. And I think this was hyper accentuated with Thailand. And so there were some pleads for help from to the West international community. Things were going too slow at the time, and so they decided that to draw attention, their policy was just to push back those refugees and to send them back to Cambodia. Now, somewhere along the chain, the military decided that we're going to take 40,000 refugees, and instead of sending them back an hour from where they entered it through the border of Morena Preah, they decided to send them all the way to overnight to this place called Preah Vihear, where there's this famed temple, this ancestral relic and treasure between Thailand and Cambodia called Preah Vihear Temple. And it's the highest cliff side of that entire mountain range. And it's that, I had mentioned earlier, that place with festive landmines. They forcibly deported the refugees, 40,000 of them, up to 40,000 down this mountainous terrain. And it was done in semi-secrecy. And as you can imagine, it was just a horrifying, horrific scene. And survivors like my father would say that I've lived through the killing fields. I've lived in a concentration camp. I probably have gone through seen some of the worst things that one could as a young teenager. But to live through Preah Vihear, this incident, was the worst of all 4 years combined. And it was just a mere two few weeks he was there. And just the scene that was, you could imagine, of people just having to rappel off vines down into this mountainside. And then they find that there are these treacherous landmines at the bottom there.
Yeah. I can, it's just like, it's such a horrific image. I remember when my dad told me about it initially, I could not sleep well that night because I kind of went down this rabbit hole, which how I ended up stumbling upon your work. But I went down this rabbit hole of trying to find more information about this, essentially this a genocide on its own of people being physically pushed down a mountain towards a landfill infested area in which they were trying to run from. I mean, the whole thing just felt so eerie and disgusting and horrible that something like that would happen, and was so kept hidden, as you mentioned. I mean, they hid it semi on purpose. And I think it shows, because I feel like it's only now, as we mentioned before, 50 years later, that we are having these tensions really arise, that a lot of people are starting to ask and really recognize what had actually happened there 50 years ago. You said at this point, it's been just really, really overwhelming. What has been the kind of toughest part of this whole thing so far with everything going on?
It's actually a very good question. It's been a mixed bag of emotions. There are so many cool things about it. If you had gone 2 months ago and looked up Ghost Mountain, Cambodia, you would only find our film. And there were only a few views on the Cambodian subtitled version. And if you go on today, there's tons of content there and people making AI videos or even reaction videos. And that has been great. It's historically getting the focus it needs from very nothing to something. And here's, after all these years, 15 years, it's like, when I had first learned of this story, I was like, this is not a story I could ever let go. I was going to try really hard to make sure not just Cambodians would know the story, or Thais, the whole world would know the story. And that's always been my heart, and the heart I'm always going to convey is that my objective is to make the world recognize the need for human rights and human dignity here. And this was a clear, transgression of that. And so to see that it's coming to light now after all these years, there was such a large level of mixed emotions, me thinking about the past and how I got here and how long it kind of took, and how actually didn't feel that long, because I actually kind of lived this story itself. And how much I felt for, the survivors who have gone through this. They've been going on the comment board, and each one of them has been saying, thank you for making this film. I lived through this. I have seen all of this. And it's, for me, with my father, there was this recognition of being seen, and having this trauma actually being shown to people was probably something that was very edifying and therapeutic for them, or cathartic in some ways. And so that was the most rewarding thing I could take from. I got so many emails too, people just telling privately, because I think a lot of these survivors, the reason why it's been so much hidden and unkept is because a lot of the survivors just didn't want to talk about it anymore, because it was so traumatic. And I think a lot had already gone and lived in the United States, and they found a new life, and they just wanted to move ahead. Hence, that was a lot of the mentality of killing field survivors then.
Yeah, yeah. And that's generally what you will see. It's quite common, for everybody. A lot of parents, I feel like it's quite rare to have a parent who would want to open up that door, especially especially something as horrific as Preah Vihear. I mean, granted, the Khmer Rouge in itself was just horrific, but something about the fact that they were trying to escape. So this is like the end of the regime already, and then it's just the cherry on top to just have that happen to everybody. So, or to the unlucky ones that were transported up there. So, what has been the response between American viewers, and it seems like it was shown recently in Cambodia, right, James? Like, was
Yes.
that the first time that it was shown in Cambodia, or has it been shown before?
No, I think that's the first time Cambodians have ever seen the film and heard about it and heard the story. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that news site and the Monday Night Talk that did it, or Monday Talk, now it cracked open this entire story for the public there. So I have not, the most of my responses to your question have been here in America, and what Americans' general heart feeling around the situation was. And it's actually quite similar, with a little more. It's like, wow, I've never heard this story. Everyone should know this story. And then in Cambodia, it's more like, wow, this is history. We're all neglecting our own history, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not even teaching ourselves this, and we should be. And they're all saying things like, keep sharing this, get it out there. And of course, there's the anger around the current conflict today. And I've had to make statements on the channel. They've all been going to YouTube to watch it. And I've had to make statements that this is not, please don't say anything hateful towards Thai people.
Mm-hmm.
The citizens of Thailand, I had to make it clear that there were many Thai people who helped refugees, and there were diplomats in that country who tried in the situation. It's a very complex topic too, in some ways, because there is a degree of separation between the Thai parliament, Thai royal government versus the Thai military. And I think there are distinctions that we need to have with that. And so that's what I was trying to do, is not to allow people to just paint it blatantly as like totally Thai people themselves. And I think that was not going to be helpful for the film. And I made that clear to others.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important take and stance, especially in this world of like social media and toxicity when it comes to certain news like this. And I feel like, I mean, in general, I feel like this world has just become more divided as time has gone on. And, social media and the way people express themselves nowadays, it just kind of has led us to this kind of environment in this world. So I think it's very, very important, very, very needed that you take that stance that, like, hey, there is a distinction, and the point of this whole thing is not to tear down any one country or culture, and even even to say like, oh, you know, yeah, there's a huge distinction between all those three, but also there's just bad people in general, like whatever race you are or whatever country you come from. And so no, I think that's very important. And the fact that at the very, if anybody listens to this and gets anything out of this podcast episode, my hope is that people can just listen to this and, as you mentioned, can understand the need for humanitarian aid and the suffering that Cambodia has gone through already. I think this education piece here is just so, so important. And as you said, I think it's really, really great that it's finally getting its light. You have been back to Cambodia recently within the past year. Tell me a little bit about how that trip kind of relates to this whole thing. What are you doing there?
I was there this past March, actually. And I've created this foundation, Preah Vihear Foundation, with not only the aims of making this film, Ghost Mountain. There was this real genuine need. I thought that there would be a need to preserve a lot of the story somehow. And one of the things is through a memorial or a museum of sorts. And so I was kind of there, kind of scoping out the area to see how feasible that was. And, yeah, I could see one of the things that I saw was how very few people in the tourists actually go to Preah Vihear Temple. And I thought that was such a shame. I think that's one of the most beautiful relics ever. Great sunsets and sunrises, places you can take these incredible shots there that you would want. Mostly it's a destination that Cambodians know about. And a lot of what I've seen over the years, I've gone back and forth many, many years. I've seen a lot of it change from an incredible jungle landscape into now what's becoming more and more like a military point. And I saw more and more military barracks there. And that was kind of, there's a mixed feeling about that where I wish people had actually seen Preah Vihear and Preah Vihear Temple, what was 10 years ago. It was quite a stunning place. And you could see why the Angkorian Empire built the temple on top of that cliffside. And you can just see the vast reaches of the jungles. But now it just shows you the intensification of the conflict. And I could sense that back in March, where there was just more and more attention being put towards fortifying the military in that area. There were talks that I heard of like disagreements that came back and forth. That's probably the most I'm going to get into. And when it came down to the conflict later on, I was surprised, I think. But in hindsight, I could see all of the clues that were leading up to it there. And that a lot of that stuff that we're hearing now probably has been building up for a bit much longer than we as a public know about as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the whole place where refugees were displaced and that whole atrocity took place, Ghost Mountain, nobody still knows about it. It's still right next to Preah Vihear Temple for the moment. And it's still in disregard.
How has your father been taking all this news as well? How has that affected him?
It's been the same for him as well. Quite overwhelming. He hasn't gotten any much sleep past weeks. It's quite cool because in our own towns, because we have friends and family, and they're like, "Oh, I've seen you on the news. I've seen your videos and stuff." So they become local celebrities again for amongst their own localities and stuff. I think at the moment, my father, there was such, over these past 15 years, it's been a long time trying to get the story out. And there was this idea of like, well, do people really care? Or how long is this going to take? And these stories do take a long time for something like this of such magnitude sometimes. And I think for it to see it actually crack open and the public to well receive it has been affirming to him. And again, we're thankful we can shed light on this and recognize the survivors and also the victims finally. Who knows how many casualties, 13,000 estimated, who lost their lives there. And they will not be forgotten for what had happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that sense of validity, right? It almost feels like history forgotten the Khmer Rouge, and then also, let alone within the Khmer Rouge, Preah Vihear for so long. And very similarly to my father, when I was sharing his story, it's like, at the very least, and at the end of the day, I really do hope that all the pain that these survivors has gone through is not in vain, and that it's just not forgotten. And so it's really, really exciting at the very least that when people research something regarding Preah Vihear or Ghost Mountain, that they do have something, your documentary and your book, to kind of look back on as resources, because they're really, as you said, I feel like if it wasn't for those two pieces out there, which are very, very necessary, I just don't know if there really would be something tangible for somebody to really hold on to like that. And you talk about the documentary Ghost Mountain, which was released in 2019. I want to talk a little bit about that process. It takes a long time. You mentioned that the book that you had written, you started when you were in college, but I do know just in general, a documentary takes a long time. Maybe bring us back to like when you started getting that idea. Was it the book first? Was it documentary first? And then kind of take me through that journey and how it came.
Yeah, I'll actually take you back to my own history and story.
Sure.
There's two parts of very quickly. I think I went through a very difficult period many years ago and just wondering, how do I get out of this? And the impression of like my family being survivors hit me. and survivors of genocide. And I had never taken notice of that. And I could just sense like what they had gone through, even though my father never told me the story. And that hung with me and actually pulled me out of it, this difficult period I had. And then a couple of years later, I had done a study abroad in Singapore, and this is Southeast Asia. This is probably like quite a storied country, city state that went from a fishing town in the 70s to what it is today, vying to be the next Hong Kong. And there was such an immense amount of grief. And I never identified with this. I think viewers should recognize I had identified as an American for a very, very long time. But I could feel this weight of presence of this morning, like, whoa, this city state is what Cambodia or Phnom Penh should have been and more. If the killing fields didn't happen, it'd be a pretty high possibility that it'd be like the Seoul or the Taipei or the pseudo Shanghai and Hong Kong of today. And it'd be all the conversations of tech and whatever. And unfortunately, this genocide had just been so diabolically terrible and had just sent back the country back to the Stone Age. This is just what they lost in all of that tragedy. And so that weighed heavily on me. And this became like, it put in such a heavy historical and economic sense of what took place. So from then on, it was like, I need to tell this story. I think people need to recognize, yeah, lives are lost and that's statistics, but there is also a global story that was lost too. And Cambodia could have been a major contributor to the world today instead. So I began asking my father to tell me the story, and he actually balked at that idea for a couple of years. And then he caved in at one point. I would tell him how important it was, how Holocaust survivors left behind a record, and they wanted to make sure these things could never happen again. And that was that was my pitch to him and how I tried to persuade him. One of the things I think said was, in the last bit I tried was, I think you need to do this because you're the only one capable of speaking and remembering those who lost their lives, forgotten forever, unless you tell your story. And he has told me now that's what sat and weighed with him the most. Yeah. I didn't know the Preah Vihear story. I think I would add, like your father, he brings it up there, and most of it comes from family conversations and dinner table talks with friends and family. He never sat down and told me the whole story. But then when I started to pick out, like, wait, refugees through a minefield, and then I would ask, where was that? And it's like, Preah Vihear. Then I began to do my research. There are several books that are actually written on this. Now, today, you can see that the reaction from Thailand is naturally, this is a conspiracy, this is a lie, this is propaganda pushed by the Cambodian government. And they can probably see me and know that I don't speak that much Khmer other than saying, like, I'm hungry. And so I don't think I'm a very good witness to be a very good candidate to be a government arm to tell the story. I'm probably the least likely figure you would pick. And so the story has been documented though by people scholars and people who were involved in refugee rescue work in that period of time. Two books bring to light are William Shawcross, Quality for Mercy, and then Indochina Refugee Rescue Workers by Larry Clinton Thompson, who has the witness accounts of the State Department workers who were involved in this incident at that time. So you can't say any of this is AI generated. These are books that were predated many years back, decades so. And then there are several books that do have witness accounts. T.W. Mam has one, To Destroy You Is No Loss. And Yvette Parapali, who was very, very instrumental helping to try to save those refugees, was part of this. And here's a little tidbit. If you ever are old enough to remember the movie, what was that called? The Constant Gardener in 2004. It talks of this humanitarian woman who gets murdered, blah, 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 a car crash. That movie and book, its fictional account, was actually based on this woman, Yvette Parapali. And so she was involved, particularly trying to save Cambodian refugees from going to Preah Vihear at this, especially like my father, which is quite amazing. So there always have been it's been right there on the threshold of entering the cultural kind of zeitgeist, but it just never got there. And so because of that, I was like, there's so much here. I know that I just got to keep pushing and telling the story and doing whatever. Even if actually people don't even care about it, whatever, I did the right thing. You just, who cares about the results? It was the right thing to do. And I would regret it for the rest of my life, regardless. But if I keep pushing, maybe it will get out there. I'm sure it would have at some point too. And that's how I felt the whole way through.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had to get the story out. Was it the book first or the documentary? And how did
That's
those
right.
two kind of
So
come to
we
fruition?
started with the book first, as sitting down with my father and interviewing him. Basically, 5 years into the book, a family friend introduced us to my co-producer and co-director, Virginia Lynch Dean, who had done several other movies, and she got very interested in the story, and she became the mother of the film. And was like, let's interview. And so we started in a small sunroom in Southport, Connecticut, just interviewing some of the rescue workers my father had become friends with, as you can see in the film, and who knew about this story particularly as well. And it went from interviewing them to DC, and all of a sudden we're in the Thai-Cambodian border, just filming there. And that was one I couldn't believe. And yeah, and it took 5.5, the book, 5 years later from starting the book, we did the film, and that took 5.5 years to complete in the documentary. And then I only came out with the book 2.5 years ago, and that was a 13.5 year journey. Way harder than than a documentary. They're both very difficult in that instance.
Yeah, I think, if anybody who hasn't watched Ghost Mountain, I definitely highly recommend it. And I will link and we'll talk about where people can find it after this. But when I was watching it, I thought the most impactful part of that documentary was actually watching your father walk through exactly where the incident happened and just watching his face as he kind of crunches through the leaves and looks down and he points, yeah, this is where this happened. This is where that happened. And I remember watching that and feeling like, wow, you must have been so proud in that moment. And I don't know if it was the first time that he had gone back, but I can imagine you feeling
It
like,
was completely 3 days after just arriving in Cambodia. We brought him there, and he had never been there since 40 years prior.
and so just the emotions that I can imagine that were like rushing through his head and him just being brought back to those dark places in his head and you probably feeling like, yes, this project absolutely needs to come out, not only for him but for the people who would also have been here on this very land. What was when the documentary initially launched, what was the response? And would you say the response now is way more than before? Like what is the difference? What's that comparison?
It's getting out there more so now. When we first launched, we had released it at the Sedona Film Festival, and we came in third in audience rating in our category. And I was ecstatic. I was like, this is great. And people were coming up and saying like, wow, they were so deeply affected and they were going to think about it a long time. And I was like, great. There are all these rest of these film festivals we're going to go to, and we're going to keep showing this film and promoting it and getting it out there. And then COVID came. This is 2020. And so when people are like, what happened to the film? Why am I hearing about this now? I think it's probably because of COVID was one aspect of it, that put it kind of wayside for its own reasons. And from then on, I was getting more introductions by person when COVID started to peel off, to show it at schools and universities. So I've shown it here. I've shown it here in the United States in New York at the Roosevelt House, Yale University. We've been on C-SPAN and it's PBS. People can watch it there as well. And I think a year and a half ago, I've been introduced to several people who work on curriculum building in the state of Connecticut. This is my home state. And they have an initiative to require Asian American Pacific Islander history. And so they want to make this as part of the required curriculum so that every high schooler who goes through and graduates from in this high school in the state of Connecticut would have to watch Ghost Mountain. And that's been really cool because it's my home state and we're getting that type of reception there. And for here in most recently in Cambodia, it's hitting that nerve today. And while I never had to deal with the controversies of the story, I'm having to do that today. There's a there's a elevation of the obligation and responsibility, whereas opposed to before I was just telling a story and people would be deeply affected. Now I have to be very careful about the facts and the details and about crafting what is truly the story so that it doesn't get discredited. And I'm very much intent on doing that and responding to some of the responses that come from those who feel differently about the film. Like, is this truly what happened? There's no evidence. This is slander towards a specific country, or even in for those who resonate to the story of misrepresenting the facts, and saying things that are incorrect, like saying they're instead of 13,000 would drive up the figure to 43 or 47,000, or throw in. And today's people are trying to create tons of content and videos, and they may not be as careful with the historical facts or what's out there, and they may add things so much easier with AI today. So I've find myself contending with that most recently because I know it's important for the credibility of the story that people know precisely and accurately what happened. And I don't want to over exaggerate or embellish it more than it is, and also place the blame on the wrong parties as well. It is a particular story that happened, yes, on the Thai-Cambodian border. It is at Preah Vihear. There were 47,000 refugees sent there, and there were 13,000 of them, according to a CIA report, that lost their lives and went missing. And there could be more, but that's what we know right now. And so, yeah, continually going off and telling people those things is what I find I'm going to have to do now.
Yeah, yeah. And would you say that has been kind of just the biggest challenge, I guess, in just the most recent couple of months with kind of the clashing of the reception of this, but also the clashing that is happening in Cambodia? You would say this has been the challenge for you, the hardest challenge?
Yeah, it has been. I had to put on like a public PR hat and at times and think about what each party would think about this. And I had to find videos and also weigh in on them. It also makes me, now I think people are following and subscribing more so from Cambodia, and they're doing that for a reason. And the film is only like, it only introduces you to the story. There is actually so much more there. And there are written accounts of this by people, especially in the book Under the Naga Tail, my father. And we only made the film just to get people a taste of what happened because we know how actually terrible it was. And people can't even handle this film. And so those are things I'm going to have to, I think, make videos on. I'm going to lay out a case for why this happened or how this happened and present it to the public community for them to see and have all the evidence. And so I've been thinking more about that and how to go about that.
Yeah. Would you say that, so you're definitely saying there's more detail, if not all the detail that's in the book, right, James?
Absolutely more. I think if you watched, for anyone who hasn't watched the film or has already seen it, you're only getting 5% or 10% of the actual story. We left out an enormous amount of what actually happened when people tried to leave out of Preah Vihear through that minefield. And when you watch it, like, how did they get out? And what happened there? And just this dreadful scene that take place. There are other stories of, of eyewitness testimonies by other people. There are also the accounts by the journalists and Westerners who were not there, but who reported of survivors, and then documented. I think those are things I want to show to the public. Because right now, all they're seeing is Ghost Now in the film. And then I put on the YouTube page, and I'm going to make a page for all the other books that have been written about it. But that's it. And so there is more out there. And I think people, as they will go through this as I've gone the past 15 years, is that, wait, I cannot believe this terrible thing actually happened. And it was lidded like this for so long. And it was under just the shadow of this contention over this temple. And how did history drop this completely? And you'll go through that. And at the end, people will say, like, I cannot believe humans could be as cruel to other humans like that. Never again is what I hope people's reaction is to that.
And your father's basically kind of staying out of all of this, right? I mean, he's like, I don't want to be PR trained. I'm just going to be here.
Yeah, I think he's just going to tell his story when he's called, and sit and watch at this point in time. I think
Yeah.
this is what I took on for sure when
Right.
with the mindset of doing this foundation too.
Right. So how is this talk to me a little bit about the foundation as well, and how has your mission now changed? Have you been fueled with more purpose now that all of this is kind of coming together? Talk to me a little bit about.
I think um, it still has all the same components as when I started it way back, because I knew very quickly that this was going to be a story that if it strikes, it'll light fire with the rest of the public. There's long-term visions are still very much in like the same, what I like to do, archive, preserve, tell more of the history, and hopefully maybe the public has such a great response we can do a memorial or etc. on that point. I think I've also, given how much time I've spent here with other and seeing the response of the public towards the story and them creating content, I think my change in mindset has been also to invite the rest of the Cambodian community into this too. So I'm gonna have to think more about that because they've been incredible in trying to tell the story. I've seen like 14 different videos. There've been like 2 reaction videos of them watching it, and so I would like more of that and collaboration across the board. I would like to collaborate with other people who have done their stories and told them too.
Mhm.
So hopefully it goes from just being this single few people into a much larger and broader thing.
Yeah. And the foundation, the Preah Vihear Foundation, what is its mission and how does that
I would like to raise awareness for this particular story, the deportation of Cambodian refugees to Ghost Mountain, Preah Vihear Mountain, and whatever means it takes for that in a way that we have the resources for those things. So that's going to be it. And it's to highlight that area of Preah Vihear and to bring more attention for other people who go to Cambodia, who know about Jung Ek or the Janus Toslang in Phnom Penh or Angkor Wat, to also think about Preah Vihear and Preah Vihear Temple and to make that trip out there. And to know that in one of the highest and most prized and treasured relics in Cambodian history on this mountain, right in the shadows, is also the story that was invisible for 40 years. So that's what I would like to do with the foundation, have it do for the country of Cambodia.
Mhm, mhm. And this memorial that you're talking about, it seems like what is that process like? Is it hard to get one of a memorial out there? You mentioned that you would probably need kind of enough public uproar,
Yeah, I
essentially, to
think I would need
really.
more public support on this. I think I'm going to see how this plays out for now before I sort of do an outreach or call
Mhm.
to the public to do something. I think the public right now just needs to hear the story first and get educated on it, before I go to that place and want to do. But there were comments in the YouTube video wanting a memorial or etc. some sort. So I'm working on those. I'm gonna wait and be patient and know that that would probably come in time.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember feeling very similar feelings after watching your documentary as well. Because if you guys were to Google, now that you guys know, listeners, that this has actually happened, if this is the first time that you're hearing it, I remember Googling Preah Temple and reading Google reviews. You can essentially rate a temple. You can go on Google and people 5-star, 4-star of their tourist experience at the temple. And I kept on scrolling to see if there was anything regarding anybody knowing what had actually happened there. And so I think that's really, really wonderful that you have really taken on this torch and you are essentially the spokesperson that we need to kind of represent and champion the history. I know it started 15 years ago, but you're the right person to do it. And I'm so glad. I mean, I'm sad that it has taken kind of this, kind of conflicting time period in history for, the documentary and the book to really have its light, but is in a sense helping educate more people. It's getting the word about these resources out there. And I have always been a huge champion of getting more people to learn about this. James, I remember reaching out to you, years ago, when I've Googled this and I've learned about it. And I still believe that it is something that absolutely needs to be out there, and I'm glad that it is out there for a time when people are looking for more information. So I I'm just glad. I'm just glad that this is happening for you and for your father. You mentioned that kind of when you're looking towards the future, you're thinking of, more collaboration with other Khmer content creators, etc. What else would you say is in the future for you and this foundation and this documentary?
I think I'm going to stick with those things. Those are quite heavy hitters at the moment.
You're like, that's enough for now,
Yeah.
actually.
I also still have a full-time job here in the States and
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah. It's it's a lot, but I think regardless, and it's good to point out too that most of the content creators out there, like yourself and myself, like we all also have full-time jobs, but I think it just goes to show how passionate we are about these things that we talk about, these things that we create and do.
I will say I have a Khmer version of the book that maybe in the next year will come out in Cambodia.
Mm.
It's been translated a year ago, and I've been holding on it for a bit. So someone's helping me to think about how to print that out and get that out there. So people have been asking. I think a lot of people are already reading the ebook in English, but there'll probably be a Khmer version in the future.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah. I think the fact that the documentary was shown out to the Cambodian audience for the first time this year, and you getting the response that so many of them really don't know what happened in their backyard is just kind of fueling the need for more resources to be in Cambodian, to be in that language so that they can learn. If anybody wanted to watch Ghost Mountain and the book, where can they find it, James?
You can go, and the most search thing to find this is just go on YouTube and go Ghost Mountain Cambodia, and you should find it right at the top there. It'll say Ghost Mountain, the second killing fields of Cambodia official. And 40 minutes, that's all it is, and a very easy watch. And you'll
Mhm.
find links in there to us, the Preah Vihear Foundation, in that YouTube link with links to my book and also other books of other survivors who wrote their stuff. Because they, there are a handful of accounts that predated my father's, that are also out there I want to acknowledge.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, what I'll do is get those links from you and I will link it in the show notes so everybody can kind of take a look at kind of the full list of resources if you wanted to learn more about this incident. James, thank you so much for coming on here
Thank you.
and sharing just where you are. I know it's not easy, as you said, at this point in time. I could only imagine how overwhelming it is and kind of in this stage where you're realizing yes, I'm going to have to step forward and kind of be that person for anybody who wants to learn about the Preah Vihear incidents and the genocide that had happened there. But you are putting yourself forward and you are stepping out there and you're not afraid, it seems like, to do so. So I'm just proud that we have somebody, as I said, to really be in that role. Where can they find you and your work, James? I know you mentioned that's where they can find Ghost Mountain, but you also have a website maybe if people wanted to kind of look you up.
Yes, so pvfund.com. That's PVFUND. Sorry, .org, not .com. We're a nonprofit. You can find our email, our social handles if you want to reach out to any of us, to me out there. Very easy.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and anyone who's listening, as you had heard from James himself, we are looking for just more collaboration potentially. So if you guys are watching the documentary, maybe you can film, you can make some content about it so we can get the word out there. But as I said, all of this is just super, super, super important as we introduce this really forgotten part of history of the Cambodian experience and the Cambodian diaspora. So thank you, James, so much for coming on here. Really appreciate
Pleasure.
it.
Pleasure's on mine. Thank you so much to you and your audience as well. Grateful.